So the objective of this lesson is to learn how to select a valid identifier name. Just to refresh your memory again, an identifier is the name given to entities like variables, functions, objects, and so on. Names are given to persons, animals, and plants to identify them, and in programming, names are given to variables, functions, and objects to identify them. So, how to name your identifiers? The first thing that you have to remember is that identifiers are case sensitive. So if you name an identifier capital X, it is not the same if you name it as lowercase x. Rule number 2 is that identifiers can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Nothing else. For example, inside an identifier name, you cannot use a question mark or a plus sign or a multiplication sign, and so on. Next, identifiers cannot start with a number. So you can call an identifier x1, however you cannot call it 1x. Next, identifier names cannot be the same as Python keywords. So you might ask, what are Python keywords? Here is a list of all the Python keywords. These words are defined in Python environment to have a particular meaning. So you cannot use any of these words as your identifier. For example, you cannot define a variable and call it OR. Let me open the Python IDLE and show you a few examples. First of all, let's start with the rule number 1. Let's say I have a variable called x and I put it equal to 3. And I have another identifier, capital X, and I put it equal to 5. Notice that if I say print small x, which means I'm asking the computer to show me the value of the identifier with the lower x, it will print 3. And if I say print capital X, it shows me 5, and it remembers that the small x and capital X are not the same. Next, identifiers can only contain letters, numbers, and underscore, and that is it. So, for example, I can call an identifier x1 and put it equal to something, which is fine. However, if I call my identifier 1x and try to put it equal to 7, Python gives me an error, which is called a syntax error, which basically means this is not acceptable. I can use underscores in the name of identifiers. So I can call it, let's say, hello there, and put it equal to a number. In this case, that's fine, and it remembers that the value associated with hello there is 6. And if I say, and it prints the value of hello there. However, I cannot use space in the name. For example, if I say hello there is equal to 6, you will get a syntax error because spaces are not allowed as part of a name of an identifier. Next, you can put a combination of letters and numbers and underscores in your identifier. So I can say, and this is fine. However, if I ever say something like, this gives me syntax error because it has a $sign which is not allowed. Next, if I use one of the Python keywords as the name of an identifier, I will get an error. For example, if I say, it gives me a syntax error because 4 is a keyword. Or let's say in, again, in is a keyword and it cannot be used as an identifier. Here again is the list of all the Python keywords. You don't have to worry about memorizing any of these. You probably use all of these words and you will automatically remember all of them. Let me give you some examples of valid and invalid identifiers. These are all valid identifiers, and as you can see, again, I repeat, ABC starting with the capital A is not the same as ABC when it starts with the lower a. These two are two different identifiers. And here's example of some invalid identifier. The first one, which is 2x, is invalid because it starts with a number. The second one, which is x.2, is also invalid because it has a dot between the x and 2. The next one is a minus sign 2. Again, it cannot be used because a minus sign is not allowed. The next one, which is my x, is invalid because it has a space between my and x. And last one, which is a 4, cannot be a valid name for identifier because it is a Python keyword.